Board challenge. Last one of the bootcamp, right? So, right, we have a function, get a score, that it does some tricks and eventually returns the first name and the eventual score of a user represented by his or her ID and the ID of the challenge where he or she has been playing. So before going into too much detail, as you know, whenever I find any typo, I tend to stop everything and fix the typo, right? Because if it doesn't work now, if I add more code, it won't work neither, right? So let's tidy up a bit. So, first of all, which are? Can you tell me the obvious typos, the obvious problems here?
First thing I do is go to that red error and hover over it to see what it's telling me.
Correct. So this is the most obvious one, right? Red, wrong. So why this is wrong? It needs to be one argument. Correct. Let's put some brackets on it. Round. So now this is correct. Any other typo? Any other thing that you think is wrong? I'm just purely talking about typos. Typos means that the errors, console errors, right?
So you open your then.
Yep. Should be fine.
Well, we don't have a get user and get challenge function.
Correct. Yeah, let's do that now, right? Obviously, we don't have the get user and get challenge function. So let's create these functions. So I'm going to create a new function, a fake function called get user. It receives what? User ID, correct. And the function is going to be executed asynchronously because in real life that will be a request to the backend, an HTTP request to the backend using fetch probably. So I'm going to simulate that. How can we simulate asynchronous behavior in a function? Set timeout. Okay. Set timeout. Let's assume that this takes half a second. But then, is this enough? So, and then what?
Need a promise.
We need a promise, correct.
A new promise.
Correct. Every time you have an asynchronous function, please create a promise. And how promise works? What do we put inside of the promise?
Resolve and reject.
Resolve and reject. I'm going to ignore the reject one. I'm going to assume that this just literally works, right? So, so then what? Set timeout, and then after half a second, what? Here we are done.
So you want to return an object.
Return an object, like that. And what the object has? First name is going to be what? Tom, you have the opportunity to declare the variable value. Ray. And last name?
Hewitt. Hodson.
Is what?
Ray Hodson.
Ray Osman. Cool.
New breed of code.
Yeah. Right.
Love child.
So will this be resolved, rejected? Why? What's going on here? In other words, why we need that? Why we need a resolve variable if we are not using it at all?
Oh, you need to do .then.
.then. No.
It's a callback the resolve.
Say it again?
To call the resolve back, no?
Yeah.
Because that's what tells you that the function has been executed.
Yeah.
So you need like resolve brackets.
Resolve brackets instead of return, or where we put that?
Put the whole thing inside.
The whole thing, including the return? No.
Probably not.
Probably not, of course not, right? So the way you resolve a promise is that. You resolve, and what are we resolving? That. So that will be the eventual data that will be offered here, right? To make it more interesting, I'm going to simulate real dynamic resolution time. At the moment it's half a second, but in reality it may depend, right, on your network, on your database, you know. So how can we make this dynamic? Instead of half a second, it could be 300 milliseconds, 700 milliseconds. How can we do that? Math.random. Yes, I like that. What math.random returns? Correct, that's correct.
Scale it up.
Correct, look. It returns a number between 0 and 1. So how can we do that so it returns a number between, because this is milliseconds, between
multiply by 1,000?
Correct. 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 So if we do that and we multiply by 1,000, right? Let's simulate in the console what will this return, not a number.
So math.round.
It's random, right? No, yes. Yeah, it's not random, obviously, it's random. Math.random. So if we try that, that's correct, right? Do we want to round the number? Probably we should, right? So math.round. So that will hopefully give a number between 1 and 8,000, more or less, right? But that's good. That's the trick. Right. So because we have that function in place, now I would like to do the same thing with the other one. So the other one is the get challenge. So this is going to be pretty much the same thing, right? So I'm literally going to copy and paste it. Get challenge. So it receives the challenge ID. And then that's the same thing. Another set timeout. And what data is the get challenge function returning inside of the promise?
Property score.
Score. And what's the value, Tom?
100.
Ooh. You play hard, huh? Cool. Right, so we got our two asynchronous functions. So do you think this will be enough, at least to not having any issue? So syntactically speaking, will this work, yes or no, and why? You know, yeah, of course, we'll call it in a minute. But before invoking the get score function, I want to see if syntactically speaking, this is correct, or if I press this button, if it's going to throw any error. What do you think?
You're going to get
an error. Why an error, Tom?
So the first object you're destructuring, you're assigning it to a user variable.
That's it. That's interesting, right? User. What's the value of user? Undefined. What happens when you try to do undefined.first name? That's an error. That's an error, right? Because undefined is not even an object. It's nothing. However, let's see if that fails. Look, even though this clearly throws an error, we don't have any error in the console. Why?
Is it because your promise isn't catching the error? Or
no? Not really. This is because... Say it again?
The promise works. Is it because challenge and player?
No. Okay, let's do something. You like that, eh? I'm going to do a bootcamp just for doing breakpoints, right? It will be a full-time activity, just adding breakpoints everywhere. So, right, you tell me. Breakpoint order, Gin. Osman. Say it again? I don't know. No, we are not invoking the function. Say it again? You don't know. Victor?
Yeah. Free?
Yep. Free. That's wrong already.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right, we haven't even called the...
Eugene?
We haven't called get score.
Say it again?
What's it wrong?
Time out. Alex? Wrong. Marta? Wrong.
God, we haven't called get user.
Yeah, too late. Great. Nothing. Correct. Why 3? Why 22? Is anyone invoking the get score function? No. I can press the button 20 times. That's right. That's why it doesn't throw any error for now, right? If you don't invoke the function. Right. So that's one thing. Obviously, we need to invoke the function, and this is where everybody more or less has a struggle on the board challenge, because we have a function which hopefully works, ignoring that issue, right? Apart from that, may work. How do we invoke it? I want to do a console log of the first name and score. So Gray, for example, suggested that. I'm going to put it on, well, on top of on the bottom. I don't know. Can you still see the screen? Cool. Osman, can you see the screen? Okay, lucky you. So Gray suggested to do that. The argument doesn't matter, right? So will that display the first name and the score of the user?
Terrible suggestion, Gary.
Say it again?
Terrible suggestion.
Let's see. What do you think the console log will print now?
An unresolved promise, I don't know.
An unresolved promise.
Pending.
Pending. Okay, cool. That's interesting. Let's put, yes, to help you a bit, let's put that on top. Right, so let's see what this returns. Correct, Tom is right. That returns a promise. So if we want to deal with the values that the promise returns, first of all, we have to say it again? Resolve it. Correct. We call the function, and what happened next? This function is asynchronous, right? It may take 2 seconds to complete. Well, not 2, definitely not 2, but it will take between 0 and 1 second to complete.
Just do .then.
Correct. So call the function, and then something. So what do we put here?
The value we want to resolve.
The value. So if we got the value, how do we display the first name and the score? No one? We learned that in the promise. User ID dot first name. This is a Friday afternoon proposal, right? User ID. What's user ID, Marta? User ID doesn't even exist here. User ID exists inside of the context of the get score. But here, we don't have any variable called user ID, right? So then what? What's the value?
It's the object.
The object, the argument, correct. So how do we access the first name? That's correct. The promise eventually, this is what the promise returns. So that will be the value. How do we call this pattern? First name, comma, score. Shorthand. Correct. So when we do that, that's the same as doing first name equals first name, comma, score equals score. Oh, score, yeah, that's correct. So line 14 is equivalent to line 15. So whenever the key and the value are the same, you can merge them. So your code is shorter. So you are right. We can do value.firstName. How do we display the score? Correct. Value.score. That said, I hate calling a variable value because that tells me nothing, right? So, how do we call this pattern in JavaScript? Correct. Object destructuring. How do we call this pattern? Array destructuring. Correct. So what object destructuring and what array destructuring means? Let's have a basic example. So if I have an object, user, first name, Peter, last name, Fu. So if I want to create a variable to point to the first name, of course I can do let first name equals user.firstname, and then let last name equals user.last name, and then we can do console.log first name comma last name, right? So if we do that, oh, is it last name all? Right. So if we do that, yeah, it returns the first name and the last name. So that's correct. That's the classic approach, right? But with modern JavaScript, we can do something very sexy called object destructuring. So with object destructuring, we can combine line numbers 4 and 5 into a single line. So we can do let first name, comma, last name equals user. So yeah, that fails because probably we've declared the same variable twice. So let me comment this once. Correct. So now it works. So you see it. So now this will look for a key called first name inside of the user. It's there, and it will assign the value to that variable. So we're creating two variables. The value of the first variable will be the value of the key with the same name. I think that's easier to read than to explain, right? Does it make sense? So this is object destructuring. But then we can also have array destructuring. For example, scores. So if we want to have a variable let first score equals scores 0, right? So we can do console.log first score. So that will obviously display the first score, which is fine. However, again, with modern JavaScript, we can do something absolutely beautiful. First score, second score, third score.
Just take away the index 0.
Correct. So we are destructuring our array. So essentially we are saying, hey, please create 3 variables, and first score will refer to the first element of the array, second score will refer to the second element of the array, and third score will refer to the last element of the array. So if we display the third score, excuse me, it should hopefully display 34. Correct. Array destructuring. This is a very powerful mechanism. And what happens if, for example, I want to display, look at the one to display. I want to display first score, comma, other scores.
That's a rest parameter.
Correct. Can we do that? So what other scores value will be now?
65, 30. Well, no, it would be 65.
Correct. Correct. So now we are mapping first score to 54, and we are mapping other scores to the second argument, 65. So that should display 54, 65, correct. But if we want other scores to be an array of 65 and 34, correct. Rest operator. So now, what type of data other scores is? It's an array, correct. Boom, nice, right? Can we do it on the other way around? Can we do that? It doesn't look like. Say it again? Yeah, but even in that case...
It's going to gather all of them.
Yes, correct. So that's... Look, rest element must be the last element. So this is not correct. Today, there is a proposal on the TC39 group to accept that, because this, to me, this is valid, right? So I want to get all the values, so gather them all, but then the last one I want to have it separately. That's a powerful pattern. That will happen eventually. It's just a matter of time. Cool. So back to the exercise. Can you tell me how to destructure the value? Because first of all, value is a horrible name, and then I don't want to type so many things in the line below. How do we destructure it? Square brackets.
Curly brackets.
So I hear some voices, some male voices that disagree with you. Why you disagree with Alex?
It's an object.
It's an object, correct. So that pattern makes sense if you want to destructure an array, but value is an object. So how we do it?
First name score.
First name score.
Comma.
First name, comma, score, right? So then can we do that? Yep, that looks good, right? Because the example is getting hot. Let's try to make sure everything is correct. Now, is there anything else we need to amend before playing the test?
Yes.
What?
So your promise all.
Yep.
At the moment it has just a list of
Correct.
Promises.
Correct.
It needs to be an array.
Correct. Promise.all receives an array. You all spotted that before. That's good, right? That's an array. Correct. Anything else?
Challenge
So
and
what
player.
you use it there.
I need to change.
To change what, Victor?
Challenge and player.
Challenge and player. That's interesting. Does the order matter?
Yes.
Why?
Because promise all resolves the promises in the order that you give them in the array.
Correct. Even if we are 100% sure that user will resolve first, so for example, if we delay the challenge one, look at that. It will take like, I don't know, 1.5 minutes to resolve. So clearly user will resolve first. Even in that case, it doesn't matter. So this doesn't talk about the resolution order, because you don't know. That may change. Sometimes one could be resolved first, sometimes the other one, because we don't know. The only thing we know is the way we invoke it, the order we execute it. So we know, because this is an array, and in arrays the order matters, right? We know that get user was invoked first and get challenge was invoked last, right? So because of that, do we need to change that? What happens if we don't change that? What will be the value of the challenge? What?
It would be the user object.
It will be the user object, right? Which is very annoying, right? We could deal with it. We could do challenge.firstName, but you know, don't do that. That's super confusing. So let's call it player and challenge. Anything else? Correct. User doesn't make any sense, right? So I think it was Victor. You thought, oh, but I thought that may be an external variable, right? I mean, that's technically speaking correct. Someone may have declared a variable here, user equals whatever, right? And that may work. But still, that's suspicious. That's very smelly. So if you're doing a board challenge in a job interview, for example, Gray did it like user. That's a bit weird, right?
I just thought because you got get user and get challenge from the outside as well. I thought why not just put an object out there?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But you should mention that explicitly at the beginning, right? While you're reviewing the exercise, you said, user, is that correct? Right? It's good to ask questions, to have a chat, right? So yeah, let's change it to player. And then anything else? No? Do you want to run it? It's going to be fun. Right, so listen, I'll tell you something. This counts for the board challenge, so that means that Tom can still be the winner. Well, Tom or anyone, not anyone else, but you can claim on the ranks. So now Chrome has decided that I cannot add a breakpoint on line 27 or 28, right? That's a bit exotic. Yeah. Well, I can't put a breakpoint on line. That's fine. We'll deal with that. So. Come on, Chrome. Right, that's a bit stupid. Anyway, I mean that's what it is. So let's deal with it. So we have several breakpoints. So then you will tell me the execution order. So let's start with Eugene. 3. 8. 19. 12. Where's 12? Ah, yeah. Wrong. Marta? 3. 8. 12. 12. Wrong. Alex? 3. 8. 19. 20. 21. 29. 8, 12. Wrong. What? And 4. Correct.
Did you say 8?
Yeah, that's you know when someone is playing ping pong and is returning all the balls. It's such an incredible game, and then fails on the most stupid shot, right? So this is what Alex did, right? So it was super close, but she failed in something unbelievable. But anyway, we'll review shortly. So Osman, 3, 8, 19, 20. 27, 29 you mean?
21.
21. No, not 29, 21. Okay? Mm-hmm. 12. That's it? And 4. Let's leave it there. Next one. Gin.
I'm saying the same as Osman. No, seriously.
Yeah.
Okay. So Osman and Gin
Add me in there as well.
and Tom.
The 29 and 21 could change depending on what the random produces.
That's the key. That's the important thing. That's the important
So you
thing.
could switch those,
I believe Osman is correct, but he forgot to mention something important, that he will be correct sometimes, right? We start on 3, we agree on that, I think we all got that, right? Then we go to 8, because we call get a score, so fair enough, let's just call get a score, that's correct. And then we're invoking 2 functions, get user and get challenge. So, both functions will be executed pretty much in parallel, right? So 19 is clearly the next one. But then 20 is the next step, because even though this is asynchronous, that will happen almost immediately. So 20 is the next step. But then we wait, look, 21 and 29, it will depend, right? We have some random timeouts. Sometimes 21 will come first, sometimes 29 will come first. We don't know. And anyway, after these 2, we can assert that deterministically the promise will be resolved, line number 12, and eventually, once the promise is resolved, it returns the value, so finally it should display the console log, in theory, right? So unless there is any problem, any typo, that is likely to happen, right? That should be the correct order. Let's have a look. Right, so
Got rid of your breakpoint.
yeah, he's changed all the. No, wait a minute.
He got rid of it. Yeah.
Well, he got rid of the 3 and 4 breakpoints, right? Anyway, we'll see if the number 4 is triggered, because this is the last one. So we start at 8. Let's ignore the first one. And then what else? Then I did another breakpoint on line number 9, I think. Right, so let's skip that. Then we go to 19, correct. Then it should go to 20, correct. And then it could be 21 or 29. It's 29, but just by coincidence, right? Yeah,
50-50.
he's right, but just by coincidence. Now it goes to 21. So then, even though I can't put a console log, unless there is a proper typo, and that's the reason why we can't add the console log, we'll figure it out in a minute. So now in theory, after 21, it should go to line number 12. That looks very promising, look at that. So the player is definitely correct, the challenge is definitely correct. So let's see if now we get the console log. Oh yeah, it's there, sorry. Let me get rid of the comments. So let's play it again. Correct. That's it. So it works, right? The console log works. But again, just purely focusing on the controversial ones, so if we just keep a couple of breakpoints on 29 and 21, you will see that the order will depend, right? So for example, if I run it, it runs 21 first. If I run it again, it runs 29 first. So we don't know, right? It's not deterministic. But yeah, but it works. So that's pretty much it, guys. So we show how to deal with promises, which is something that we already knew. How to do promise.all to trigger several promises in parallel, how to do array destructuring, how to do object destructuring, how to do object shorthand, and all these kind of things, right? Can we do... no, that doesn't make sense, ignore me. No, we cannot do array shorthand, that doesn't make any sense. Right, so is there any question? No? Cool. No. Thank you, guys. Cheers.